Good afternoon. I am honored to speak today as an awakened Democrat from California. I know, oxymoron. I am offering a roadmap for investigations into the nefarious gender industry, dismantling the worst medical scandal in human history requires an understanding into the collusion among nonprofits, the medical community, and our government that has created a new category of humans who were inconceivably born in the wrong body. This has led to an ever-growing billion-dollar industry to fix them. My goal is this: to see the decimation of the deceitful gender industry. For both minors and adults. And to see that the individuals who set society on this course are held accountable civilly and criminally, including every medical society that has abandoned ethics and science in fealty to the transgender mafia. In 2007, endocrinologist Norman Spack and his protege, psychologist Laura Edwards-Leeper, opened GEMS at Boston Children's, the first pediatric mutilation clinic. Dr. Spack and Leeper abandoned the established treatment of watchful waiting for children who were distressed about their sex, a cohort of children that had a desistance rate of 98%, if not affirmed. They not only adopted the flawed Dutch treatment protocol, but they streamlined it, moving children even faster towards medicalization, because according to Leeper, there were staff shortages. There are now over 400 gender clinics in the United States. There is money to be made, and some doctors enjoy playing God. In 2023, I attended a conference in which Dr. Edwards-Leeper proudly recounted that Dr. Spack would tell people, everyone needs a Laura, because she claimed that her mental health assessments could distinguish between which child would benefit from sex trait modifications and which would not. When I asked if she followed up with any of her patients to confirm her superpowers, her answer was no. Notably, she rarely disapproved gender interventions for any of her minor patients. We already heard about Amy Tishelman. We'll hear a little bit more about her. Psychologist Amy Tishelman joined GEMS in 2013. She recently testified that she had only just asked to create a database to track the outcomes of the more than 1,000 children whose bodies the clinic had altered. Boston Children's has been experimenting on children for 18 years without follow-up, while simultaneously reducing the mental health assessments from 20 to 10 to 2 hours before prescribing puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries. Dr. Spack and Edwards-Leeper methodology exemplifies the incestuous nature of gender medicine and the falsification of medical papers that reach predetermined conclusions through data manipulation and circular referencing. They leveraged their prestige to convince other medical providers to adopt their unsubstantiated treatment protocol. In 2009, Dr. Spack contributed to the Endocrine Society's guidelines, which declared puberty blockers to be fully reversible. That is untrue. Despite acknowledging that the evidence supporting the safety and efficacy of blockers was low or very low, the guidelines were cited in the 2012 WPATH SOC 7 as a basis for recommending blocking children's puberty. Well, that is likely because Dr. Spack also happened to be on the executive committee for the WPATH SOC7, so he was citing to himself. In 2012, Edwards, Leeper, and Spack published a paper for the American Academy of Pediatrics, and again stated that puberty blockers are reversible, citing back to the endocrine guidelines and WPATH. This circular citation strategy has created a false impression that independent groups supported their conclusions. Another example of manipulation can be found in the $10 million NIH study led by Dr. Olson Kennedy, the head of Children's Hospital LA. That study failed to show that children's mental health improved on blockers. Back in 2021, Olson Kennedy presented the one-year result from her study at a USPATH conference, the US arm of WPATH. But at the 2-year mark, Olson Kennedy withheld the disappointing results. She finally published them in 2025. Well, why the delay? As Lior pointed out, it was because she was afraid that her findings would be weaponized and used in court and used to stop prescribing puberty blockers for children. So this pediatrician placed a political agenda above children's welfare. Since the NIH puberty blocker study results were not what Olson Kennedy had hoped for, she attempted to temper the failure in the study's abstract. She concluded that children's mental health would have likely worsened if their puberty hadn't been blocked. But her study had no control group, meaning that there's no possible way to support this claim. Her obviously false conclusion is emblematic of the glaring activism at all costs in gender medicine. As Dr. Laidlaw stated, Olson Kennedy employed the same gamesmanship with the hormone study results, dropping the tracking of suicides, the most stated basis used to justify gender interventions, because 2 out of the 315 children had committed suicide. Under any normal circumstances, this level of harm would have ended that study, but Olson Kennedy buried the lead. This type of manipulation is rampant throughout gender medicine. When the so-called experts are ideologues who stand to benefit from the results, scientific rigor disappears. Let's spend a little more time on Joanna Olson Kennedy. She is captured on video stating that if girls miss their breasts after top surgery, they can simply get new ones. She is proud that she has performed sex trait modifications on children who are in foster care, homeless, prostituting, and drug-addled. She has said it is no big deal if she transitions kids who ultimately turn out not to be really trans, because those kids have no fragility. She has stated it's not the worst thing to be trans, and after all, whose fault is it if she transitions a cis kid? Her answer? The child patient. She was merely providing what the child wanted. Olson Kennedy opened the soon-to-be-closed largest pediatric clinic, Children's Hospital LA. It is well known for the pressure created on families by Olson Kennedy and her wife, a female who identifies as a male. Inside that clinic, they would separate the parents and children into different rooms. They would bring in celebrities and other trans-identified people to talk to the kids and speak persuasively to them, telling them about all the different interventions they could get. While others worked on the parents in a separate room, guilting them into accepting their newly minted son or daughter. Olson Kennedy partnered with public and private schools through Gender Spectrum, a now largely defunct advocacy group whose mission was to, and I quote, "get gender ideology into every classroom." She, along with other clinicians, used schools as pathways to create and find her victims. Here is an example. This is a California middle school advertising a Gender Spectrum conference featuring gender surgeons and clinics in its weekly newsletter. Middle school. This slide is from a second Gender Spectrum conference in which kids in pre-K and older were invited. Those who have read the WPATH files, which I recommend that you all do, may recognize Dr. Satterwhite. He's noted preschool kids. This surgeon performs nullification surgeries. Think Ken doll crotch. He also performs surgeries that leaves a person's natural genitalia intact while adding fake opposite sex genitalia. Keep this in mind as you hear the phrases life-saving and medically necessary. Then there's Scott Moser, who was caught on video stating that he has no age limit for removing girls' breasts. He also contributed to the adolescent section in WPATH's SOC version 8. What we really need is a crime board showing the connections and reach of each provider, because it's quite stunning how a few people can create a whole industry that preys on the vulnerable. For almost 2 decades now, gender providers have been placing children on puberty blockers, hormones, and surgeries without knowing the full effects, while influential medical societies, major hospitals, and providers are assuring parents that these interventions are life-saving and improve mental health. These are not mistakes. These are intentional deception. For example, Jason Rafferty's 2018 AAP transgender policy is riddled with errors and dramatic statements without any citation. Despite a very public analysis by James Cantor, the AAP did not waver from its position, but doubled and tripled down. It should be of no surprise that Dr. Rafferty makes his living from a gender clinic. The AAP, as Lior stated, promised a systematic review. That was in 2023. 2 years later, it appears to not having even started it. I believe that's because the AAP knows, and always knew, that there is no scientific basis for changing children's sex traits. Investigations must occur into influential medical and mental health societies who publicize false statements knowing that their membership will blindly rely on their protocols. I recommend starting with these societies. Sticking with puberty blockers, the number of kids being placed on puberty blockers is increasing at an unprecedented rate. These figures here don't include Kaiser Permanente. We heard earlier about Kaiser. They are a giant in the trans industry. And they seem to make money both as insurer and provider. and that needs to be investigated. I think a reasonable estimate is that in 2024, the number of kids placed on puberty blockers is close to 4,000 new patients, especially in light of the admission by Director of Boston Children's, Dr. Jeremy Carswell, that puberty blockers are being handed out like candy, which in her mind is great in some ways. Great. This, despite her own acknowledgement that puberty blockers are not reversible. Puberty blockers are profitable. The drug Lupron by AbbVie costs around $27,000 for a 6-month supply. A 6-month Supprelin implant by Endo Pharmaceuticals can cost $210,000. UCSF is a leader in altering children's sex traits. Its pediatric clinic was founded and is led by Madeline Deutsch, who also serves as president of USPath. We really need that crime board showing all of these connections. The infamous Dr. Diane Aronsaf, who also works at UCSF, she teaches that 2-year-old boys who unbutton their onesies are communicating that they're really girls. And girls who dislike barrettes in their hair are communicating that they are really boys. She also believes that there are an infinite number of genders, including a Prius gender. I can't make this up. So this screenshot is from UCSF's website as of June 25th this year. It clearly states that puberty blockers are safe and fully reversible. I wonder why, then, its consent form states otherwise. This is a consent form from 2021. Let me point out a couple interesting statements. First of all, it says that children with trans identities need to have their puberty postponed, that the medication is not permanent, and that blockers treat the trauma of unwanted puberty. Puberty is not a choice. It's something humans all go through. Next, it says that the long-term effects and safety of puberty blockers is not completely understood. Well, I thought it was reversible. Isn't that what it said? Bone density will diminish, but is expected to return to normal. Now, lawyers, we will hone in on that word expected. Expected? In other words, you think so, maybe. Then again, we don't know. Oh, and puberty blockers might affect fertility. This consent form directly contradicts UCSF's website. This is purely and simply deceptive practices. In this example, the child's doctor was Stephen Rosenthal, who partnered with Joanna Olson Kennedy in the NIH study that still has not released the results of puberty blockers' effect on a child's physical health. Rosenthal also contributed to the Endocrine Society's and Pediatric Society's guidelines for transgender health, both of which state blockers are safe. Rosenthal and Olson Kennedy need to be at the center of the crime board. Dr. Marcy Bowers. He is the current president of WPATH. He justifies the eunuch identity for children because the word eunuch appears in the Bible. Again, I can't make this stuff up. As this country's most prolific castrator, having performed over 2,000 penile inversion procedures, including on children, he admitted during a Duke symposium that puberty blockers started at Tanner stage 2 plus estrogen result in a life without any sexual pleasure for males. How does one explain to a 9 or 10-year-old that he will never experience sexual pleasure in a manner that he can understand and consent to? We all know the answer: it can't be done. Incidentally, billionaire J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, and his trans-identified brother are major contributors to Duke. A 2024 Mayo Clinic study reports mild to severe gland atrophy and changes in testicular cells in males treated with blockers. It reports that this finding calls into question the reversibility of blockers. Irrespective of this admission, the Mayo Clinic's website as of this June continues to state that puberty blockers are reversible. Almost every major medical clinic or gender clinic advertised on its website that puberty blockers are reversible or merely a pause button without knowing those statements are untrue or at best unknown. Some have been scrubbing their website since the executive order and FBI probes were announced. I watched it in real time. I want to spotlight one particularly dangerous gender clinic, and that is Seattle Children's Hospital. Not only does it state that gender interventions are life-saving and puberty blockers are reversible, but it partners with its autism center. Youth with autistic traits are overly represented in the exploding cohort of children and young adults adopting trans identities. They tend not to conform to rigid sex stereotypes, leaving them vulnerable to believing that there's something wrong with them. Combining the autism and pediatric gender centers provides a steady stream of patients for expensive and lifelong gender treatments. Seattle Children's is not alone in this marketing scheme. Seattle's Gender Clinic authored and the AAP published a perspective advancing the notion that refusing to modify a child's sex traits constitutes medical and emotional abuse. Parents who refuse to consent to have their daughter's breasts removed or sexual function destroyed are seen as abusers by the largest pediatric medical society in the United States. And if I recall correctly, Seattle Children's had one of the most prominent booths at the AAP convention this year, where some detransitioners and I were escorted out from our paid-for booth because we dared to try to educate pediatricians. So yes, the AAP knows of the harms, but continues to support gender procedures. This is a screenshot from Whitman Walker Medical Clinic, a clinic right here in DC that provides services to patients 10 and older. Excuse the vulgar language, it's not mine, it's theirs. Whitman Walker claims that females can grow a male phallus from testosterone. Of course, that claim is an outright lie, though prescribing testosterone for females is genital mutilation. That part is true. I want to spotlight one surgeon and who deserves immediate investigation, and this is Dr. Sive Gallagher, a plastic surgeon in Florida. An FTC complaint was filed and ignored under Biden, but I hope this administration will investigate this predator who targets the youth, the overweight, and the vulnerable. She advertises on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube using childlike antics to sell her services while posting pictures of her lavish lifestyle her young victims' bodies provide to her. Here are a few examples. Here she's celebrating her success in a possible fraudulent insurance claim. Here are a couple pictures of her victims. Note that this young girl has scars all over her body from cutting herself. Dr. Gallagher was more than happy to let her pay for her to use her scalpel to make even deeper cuts. The woman on the side, she has no nipples. Humans have nipples. Turning to cross-sex hormones, there are two major online distributors of cross-sex hormones, Plume and Folks. Both are supposedly only accessible to adults, but their marketing suggests otherwise. Plume started with seed money from Kraft Ventures, one of California's most prestigious VC companies, raising over $38 million. Both of these online cross-sex hormone distributors are capitalizing on the market predictions of substantial growth in the gender industry. In 2022, cross-sex hormone sales were a $1.6 billion business. Planned Parenthood is also reaping the benefits of this market. This is why they want to shut us up. Let's examine one of Plume's ads. That young woman looks like a minor to me, or at minimum suggests that Plume is marketing to minors. It also looks like Plume is getting into the surgery business, or perhaps partnering with surgeons who will remove the healthy breasts of young girls. Plume, by the way, is affiliated with Stork. So Plume sterilizes the person, and Stork finds them a baby. This slide also shows a snapshot from a newsletter from Plume that a child can sign up to receive. I received it, and I faked that I was 16 years old. Now, why would Plume be publishing that runaway minors in New York are able to get hormones in its Stuff We Think You'll Like section? Looking for more clients? Enticing children to run away from their parents who won't affirm them? Folks also markets to children. Folks had its Senior Director of Audience Development, Kai Prosha, speak to kids from Friends for Youth at the Chan Zuckerberg Center. The kids there looked to be about 10 to 14. I was actually there. Kai, a male who was wearing an outfit worthy of the red light district, talked about medical transition to a group of at-risk children. These online services are tailor-made to circumvent parents' consent and detection. A website called Gender Mapper directs children to both Folks and Plume if their parents won't consent, since both of these online services use telehealth. Adults can easily order for minors. The drugs come in unmarked packages, and it's easy to change the delivery addresses. The mental health providers across the country have colluded with the medical gender complex in their abject failure to safeguard against transgender interventions. Websites like Gender Affirming Letter Access Project and Do Something Identities facilitate approval letters for gender interventions for free or in an hour with no follow-up, with no real assessments for minors and adults. Every medical provider who is just checking a box is not providing mental health care. They are order takers. The FTC can pursue every last one of them for deceptive advertising. Well, this may be out of the FTC's purview. I do want to raise the college transgender connection. Many colleges have transgender clinics right on campus or are affiliated with them, providing an endless stream of paying customers. Parents send their kids to college for an education, and their daughters come home with missing breasts and facial hair, and their sons on estrogen. I don't know if I can play this. Should work? Okay. I will end with a video that sums up everything that is wrong with gender medicine. This is from a WPATH seminar in which Dr. Dan Metzger admits that talking to a 14-year-old about gender interventions causing infertility is like talking to a blank wall. And the regret that comes later is real.
I think when we're doing informed consent, I know that that's still a big lacuna of that we do it, we try to talk about it, but most of the kids are nowhere in any kind of a brain space to really talk about it in a serious way. That's always bothered me, but we still want the kids to be happier in the moment, right?
Yeah. Medicine should never be about giving a child what he wants in a moment in time. The whole of gender medicine, even for adults, because we can't forget about the adults. Talk to a parent with a 17-year-old child who thinks that they're the opposite sex. Their biggest fear is time, because they can hold the line until that child turns 18, and then it's no holds bar. So the whole of gender medicine, it's a complete sham based on false science. Thank you.